At the same time, Sentech is going to drive the provision of additional channels over the new digital devices being distributed. For some reaction now, I'm joined by the Director of Media Monitoring Africa, William Bird. William, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. Just your overriding reaction to the latest update from the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, yesterday about how far they've gone and her approach to the whole migration process so far.
Well, I think perhaps you should consider a new ministry position, that of building or hole digging, because the hole that they've just dug themselves into, I think, is even more remarkable than the one they dug in court. They've said that they would be ready and that things are on track by the 30th of June for the switch off. By their own figures, there's nowhere near that they can possibly meet that deadline. You know, they have installed, according to the briefing by the minister yesterday, 109,000 set-top boxes since the 1st of November. So that's 5 months if you effectively take us to the point we're at today, including nice time for December break and holidays, etc., which means that you're averaging around 20,000 a month. Now, you've got 2 months. You've got May and you've got June left to install set-top boxes. Even by their own figures, they've dished out 250,000. They're not even going to make that 250,000, which means that the hardcore reality is that they are seemingly blissfully delighted about the idea that they will be switching off access to the poorest of the poor and violating their rights to access to information. It's extraordinary.
She seems to say, from my understanding, that while government is responsible for the policy for the migration, they're not entirely responsible for each and every set-top boxes. Government is doing it out of the goodness of its heart.
I mean, that's an extraordinary claim to make. Government committed years ago now to make sure that the poorest of the poor would get subsidized set-top boxes. They were talking about 5 million. At one point it was 7 million. It's now down to 3.5 million households that they're dishing those out to. Of that, they've got 1.2 registered. And that's the group that they're talking about having done by the end of June, which still leaves the overwhelming majority of those that government committed to, whether it's her department or whether they want to try and shift it onto someone else. This isn't a nice to do thing. This is about basic realizing of people's basic rights. It's not like they sat there going, oh, let's see if government can do something nice today and share and give out a little bit and make the poor feel slightly better by doing subsidized set-top boxes. That's just offensive. It's nonsense.
So you've mentioned at the start that it seems like the hole is getting bigger, that the government is digging itself into than they did in court. What do you expect to happen next? Then more legal challenges as June 30th is looming?
So let's be clear about something. In court, in the last court case, they promised, they said, yeah, we already are well on track to deliver and have switch off for the end of March. They said that they would have realized those, and all of those who had registered, they would have had their set-top boxes installed. So clearly they were either profoundly, deeply misguided, or they were misleading the court. Again, now we're being told here in public that they are on track to meet it at 20,000 set-top boxes a month. Let's be generous. Let's say they double their efforts and do 40,000. That's 80,000 on top of the 109,000. You're not even getting close to the 500,000. So by their own figures, they can't possibly meet this deadline, yet they just continue perpetuating those myths and misleading the public. What is likely to happen is that the court cases will continue. We know we're part of that. We've applied for direct access to the Constitutional Court in order to say that this is a profound incursion on the right to access to information for the poorest of the poor, and government pursuing this overt anti-poor approach should not be allowed to continue.
This has been going on for some years now, William, and the rest of the world, including on our continent, including neighboring Mozambique. I was there a few months ago. They were going big about digital migration in various parts, and the large sections of Mozambique are very rural. So what would need to happen, in your view, from a Media Monitoring Africa perspective, for the rights of the people to access broadcast television to be met and this process to be fast-tracked? What would we expect government to be doing now?
So what government should be doing, and they've issued this the tender to Sentech, is to make sure that people have set-top boxes installed, the poorest of the poor. They need to make sure that they don't get left behind, because if they do, come that switch-off date, they'll have nothing but snow to watch on their television, which is amusing for about 3.5 seconds, and then it gets thoroughly dull. So they need to make sure that they don't get left behind. Otherwise, all you're doing is just deepening that digital divide that much further. It means that the loss here is going to negatively impact the release of spectrum, and that is a tragedy. But you have to balance that off against the fact that we're saying, do we think it's okay as a country, as a democracy, with the levels of inequality that we have, to say leave several million households behind with no access to television at all? Or do we say we need to make sure that those people have access before we switch this off? Government, if they'd had a vaguely consistent approach to this, if we hadn't had 13 ministers of communication in 10 years, perhaps we may have been able to have got those people registered earlier, have proper campaigns. So they're doing it now. Great. So we applaud the minister's level of urgency. What is deeply, profoundly disconcerting is the apparent sense of being completely out of touch with reality about where they need to go and how many set-top boxes and who's going to be left behind.
William Bird, thank you very much for your time and thoughts on this matter. He's, of course, the Director of Media Monitoring Africa.